Welcome back. Got another build video for you today. So you want to play a rogue and you want to be ranged, but you don't necessarily like traps and imbuements. Well, I got a build for you. Take a look at this one. And this one will work quite well, I promise you that. And you will definitely be doing some decent damage. And high survivability, which is what we want for hardcore. All my builds revolve around hardcore, but you can always customize the build and go for more damage. Pull stuff out of life nodes, go for the crit damage nodes, stuff like that, and I'll cover that as well. So your basic skills now generate combo points. Core skills consume combo points for additional effects. That's what we're going to be going with, combo points as your specialization, because it goes really, really well with rapid fire in this build, and I'm going to show you why. So this build is going to rely a lot on applying vulnerability and critting a lot. And there's a lot of damage behind crits. I'll show you that. So, Forceful Arrow, that's going to be our main basic ability. In every third cast, we apply vulnerability on an enemy for 2 seconds. That's fantastic. Modifier, every third cast of Forceful Arrow has a 15% chance increased critical strike chance. Amazing. We need to crit in this build to make it work well. Forceful Arrow knocks back non-elite enemies if they are close. If they collide with another enemy, they'll both knock down for 1.5 seconds. Or you can do the Pierce through vulnerable. Either is an option. They're really, really... None of them are very good, I suppose. They're okay. They're all right. But I'd rather go with a more consistent knockback than the pierce through vulnerable thing. Just helps crowd control a little bit more, keep enemies away from you, and hopefully reduce the damage that you could potentially take. Moving on, we do go with the close damage reduction because, as I explained in some of my other videos, we don't know what's out there. We don't know what enemies are going to be crossing the gap or closing that gap between you and the enemy very quickly. They might be charging, leaping. We don't really know. There are already enemies that do close the gap quite quickly, but who knows what's out there, right? You will be taking hits while you're playing the game as a ranged rogue. You will be taking melee hits. It's going to happen. That's a huge damage reduction. So we're going to be taking that because this is, again, hardcore play. Rapid fire. Rapid fire, you fire 5 arrows in a relatively straight line. It's really, really good for single target. It's okay for group enemies. It's not the best, but it works well. It works well. And in this build, you could always, as you're swapping between dungeon farming and you're out in the open world, you can grab penetrating shot instead. Heck, you could even grab barrage. Whatever you want to really use, but the main source of this damage for single target enemies, for fighting bosses and such and killing elites, you really do want to have rapid fire. Because we like to hit a lot. We want to hit often, and we want to hit hard, and we want to crit. Each subsequent arrow from rapid fire has a 5% increased critical strike chance, up to 40% for the 8th arrow. Rapid fire deals 30% increased critical strike damage for 3 seconds after you evade. So the goal would be like an evade, you'd roll, and you'd fire a rapid fire off. Notice something, by the way. Critical strike chance up to 40% for the 8th arrow. This fires 5 arrows. How are we getting 8 arrows? Do you know the answer to that? I'll tell you. Combo points. The combo point system, when you use it with rapid fire, when you use your combo points with rapid fire, you get additional arrows. You get 6 with 1 combo point, 7 with 2 combo points, and then the maximum 3 combo points, you're going to get 8 arrows. That is a lot. 8 arrows come flying out, and they all have an increased critical strike chance, and that ramps up as you get towards the end of your volley of arrows, right? Why is crit so important? Should I show you? Should I jump to the end real quick? I'm going to do that. Precision. Critical strikes with marksman skills grant you precision. You gain 4% increased critical strike damage per stack of precision, up to a maximum of 20%. When you reach maximum percentage, your next marksman skill is a guaranteed critical strike that deals 40% increased damage, then consumes all stacks of precision. So as we're getting our crits, this is building up, and your critical strike damage is going up and up and up and up. You get a guaranteed crit for a ton of damage, and then it resets. So we do want to crit a lot in this build. Moving across to our more defensive abilities, 15% damage reduction against enemies, against damage over time effects. So if enemy puts a dot on you, you're going to take less damage. And then if we're crowd controlled, we have damage reduction. Weapon mastery is a must-have, whether you're using bows or crossbows. Crossbows has increased critical strike damage. Bows has increased vulnerability damage. Kind of lean towards crossbows a little bit in this build. But you find a good bow, equip it. Don't just be like, the bow is an upgrade, but I can't use it because of this. It's still good. You'll still be applying vulnerability to enemies with Forceful Arrow. It is good. Caltrops. Now, it's not really a trap like Poison Trap or the Ultimate, the Death Trap, but it works similarly, and it actually is considered a trap. So, I know I said that it's a build that you don't really have to use traps. It is true, because this is not a main source of damage. However, it will help us do more damage. Because when enemies are affected by traps, this happens. You know, you'll get modifiers that do that. If an enemy is affected by trap, this bonus will come into play. So, this is important. This is actually important for two things, survivability, and it will help us take less damage, and it will help us do more damage. Because there's something on the Paragon tree that's when an enemy is affected by a trap, so you take less damage from them. This also slows them, so the two different things that are helping you stay alive, you know, they're slower, they're less likely to hit you. And then, of course, enemies take 3% increased damage from you each second they're in Caltrops. It's going to help us do more damage. And you have 5% critical strike chance, or an increased 5% critical strike chance against enemies inside your Caltrops, double if they're vulnerable. You get a 10% in critical strike chance if an enemy's in the trap and vulnerable. Very good. Very, very good. I would definitely take that over this one. Cold damage and chill, I would not do that. It's not bad, but the build is all about crit, right? We want to do our damage too. It's not all about survivability. Using the cooldown, increase your dodge chance by 4% for 3 seconds, and then we have a way to heal. 9% max life per second while we are stealthed. And we pick up in concealment that gives us stealth that lasts for 4 seconds. What is that math? 36% of your health you'll get over 4 seconds when these combo together. But the main use of this is concealment, gives you unstoppable. We don't want to be stunned to death. That's what Unstoppable does. It'll break us out of stuns, break us out of any sort of crowd control. And for those of you that don't know, you cannot use a potion while you're crowd controlled. I've seen that. Well, while you're stunned or frozen, you can't do it. So if you're like rooted or something, that's horrible. But you could still use a potion. But there are times when I see people get stunned, and you slowly see them get hit, and they die. They just never get out of there. They can't use a potion. They can't get out. Very important to have a way to break out of there. Would highly recommend grabbing this. And you gain 40 energy when you use it, which is great. This is cool. Always be a guaranteed crit strike. But we have a lot of ways to build up our crit strike. I know we want to do it a lot. We want to crit as often as possible. But we're going to go with a guaranteed vulnerability. It's a long vulnerability for 6 seconds because we have so many crits. I don't think we need one guaranteed one. We have so many ways to increase our crits that vulnerability seems like the better choice here. Do what you want with it, but I would recommend vulnerability. Dark Shroud. 5 out of 5. This needs to be maxed out in hardcore. You need to have it. It is so good. It is 11.2% damage reduction per active shadow. You have 5 shadows. You actually can get more. There's aspects that will help you with that. And why level them? Well, you go from 8% all the way up to 11.2. That might seem like a small jump, but keep in mind, that's per shadow. So it's from 8% to 11.2, 9, 10, 11. That's 3.2% times 5. What do we get? We get like a 16%. Did I do that right? Yeah, 16% additional damage reduction just from the first hit. That's good. We want to have that. Definitely want to have that. Very, very good. 10% chance to not be consumed when you take damage. And then while you have at least 4 active shadows, you gain 8% crit strike chance. More crit. The other option is movement speed. The crit chance. Go with the crit chance. Deal 12% increased damage to healthy and injured enemies. We put 2 points in here. 3 points into increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Moving on down, we did go with Shadow Clone Ultimate, so you do get a fun ultimate in this build, which means it will mimic your abilities. You know, it'll help do your do volleys of rapid fire arrows on enemies, and it does a fair amount of damage. It really does. It's one of the better ultimates in the game. You also get Unstoppable when you use it. So we have 2 sources of Unstoppable. However, you can't rely just on this, in my opinion. It's a 60-second cooldown. Someone worded it right in my guild. They're like, that's like using Recklessness in WoW to break a fear. When it's a 30-minute cooldown in Vanilla WoW, when you have Berserker's Rage already to break a fear. That's kind of what it's like. So you really do want to have a shorter cooldown, Unstoppable ability to get yourself out of crowd controls. This is great, a great little extra bonus there. Maybe that concealment is on cooldown, and you happen to have Shadow Clone up. Use it. Get out of that stun. Shadow Clone deals an additional 20% of your damage. That brings you up to 80% damage. Shadow Clone does a massive amount of damage. It really does. Lucky hit, 30% chance to gain 8 energy, which helps you dish out a lot more energy using abilities like your rapid fire, which is honestly your only energy using ability is rapid fire. That's it. That's the only thing you're going to consume energy with. So it's all about dumping as many of those as possible into an enemy. After using an ultimate skill, you restore 75 energy. So you could rapid fire a few times, use the ultimate, rapid fire again. The ultimate's going to help do it. And then, of course, we already went over this already, but the critical strikes, increasing your critical strike damage. And then you get a guaranteed crit at the end for a whopping 40% increased critical strike damage on that last guaranteed crit. Huge amount of single target damage. Now, will this be the highest damage you can do on a rogue, ranged rogue? No, probably not. You would likely play with Poison Trap and Poison Imbuement, but this is a different kind of build, and I would argue it actually has more survivability for hardcore. It's good. You spend less points on all of this stuff here, because if you go in Poison build, you want to take these three here, which is great, but it's not really related to the build, but it does have awesome stuff like it reduces the damage enemies do. So it's great. I love the Poison range rogue. In fact, if I played a rogue range, that might be what I lean to, but this is certainly an option. It's a very strong option, and I know people like to see the big numbers rather than applying dots, right? The Poison build's all about applying dots. It's kind of like a Barbarian Bleed build. This is the big numbers, a lot of numbers, high crits. That's what this build's going to be. We're going to jump into the Paragon board now. And as I always say when we start a build, we want to always grab the left and right side on every class. There's no exception, no matter what your build is. They have life nodes on both sides for every class. And where you got resistances here, you got your life, you got damage and life, super important. We run up here, we grab the, while wielding a ranged weapon, you take 10% reduced damage. That's a permanent 10% damage reduction because we're only ever going to use ranged. Incredible glyph. You have to take that. We need 40 dexterity. We've got 10, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Don't forget that these yellows give 10 of your main stat, so we get 20 dexterity right here. We grab those. At the beginning, you could certainly grab these and then pull them out later. It's very important that we do pull these points out later if we want to get everything in the tree at the end. I'll show you. You really don't get the extra points. Exploit weakness is our next board, our next Paragon board, and we run up here. We get 4% damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. So if enemies are vulnerable, we grab all these. This 2%, 2%, 2%. So we're going to take less damage from them. Over here, damage to vulnerable enemies, damage to injured enemies. So as enemies get low on health, you'll do more damage to them because they're considered injured, and of course, we'll do more damage if they're vulnerable. So more damage there. Whenever you deal damage to a vulnerable enemy, they take 1% increased damage from you for 6 seconds, up to 15%. Not a bad legendary, pretty good. And we have constant vulnerability going out during this build, and it's pretty easy to get to. As you come up here, you just spend a couple extra points. It's like 4 extra points. There's no reason not to take that. This is the elite damage and elite movement speed nodes here. So as we kill elites, we get movement speed increase, and we do a lot more damage to elites. Life and cold resist. Love them. As you go further into your build, maybe towards the end of the game, you find that your resistances are great. You could pull points like that. You could definitely pull points out like that. You can say, okay, I'm going to take one out here, but I would always recommend taking life. You can never have too much life. There's never like, oh, my life is this, so I'll remove points from my life nodes because that's good. No. But you can have too much of a single resist. Anyone that's played any sort of ARPG, you can go over the limit with resistance, and you're like, I need to dial that back down a little bit. You could do that, and it's easy to do in some spots. You can certainly remove the points there. Up here, same thing. We got Shadow Resist here and Life Nodes. That goes into the Tricks of the Trade Paragon board. And then down here, we have our damage to distant enemies is increased. And as considering we're ranged, we're going to be doing more damage to distant enemies. And they're almost always going to be considered distant because we don't want them on top of us. That's bad. Damage reduction from distant enemies, which is good because that's probably most of the damage you're going to take as a rogue, as a ranged rogue, is from ranged enemies. Most of them. They're going to be throwing stuff at you, spells, range attacks. Damage reduction to them is great. Damage to elites we have here. Again, which is awesome because this build's all about taking down the big dudes. There is a legendary node close by, but this is all about swapping between melee and ranged abilities. We're not doing this in this build, so we're not doing that. We have a node here: 10% reduced physical damage from vulnerable enemies. That's good because we're always doing vulnerable enemy, making enemies vulnerable. 50% bonus to all rare nodes within range. That's great. Our damage is going to go up like crazy. Got armor here, which is awesome in Diablo 4 because it also helps against elemental damage if you didn't know. Then we run over into the No Witnesses board. The No Witnesses board here, we damage to healthy enemies. So as we first start fighting them, our first hit on them, hopefully it's a crit. It's going to have bonus damage because they're considered healthy. We have additional crit damage on these nodes here. Very, very good stuff for our build. Then we drop down, grab the node for physical damage, increases the damage an enemy takes from you by 1% up to 10% for 15 seconds. And like I showed you before, our attacks are very fast. A lot of arrows going out. You build stuff like this up very quickly because you have, if you have full combo points, you have 8 arrows just in a straight line, essentially hitting the same target. That builds up incredibly quickly. A lot of extra damage there. So intelligence, damage, ton of life in here. That's amazing. Love that. Oh, I got to delete this board. This was just an optional board we were looking at. Moving on here, we have our crowd control. Crowd control impaired duration reduction and damage over time reduction. So if we get dots on us for whatever reason, anything provides or gives us a burn or a poison or a bleed, we'll take less damage from that. And if we get stunned, this will help us get out quicker. But we do have 2 ways to break out of stuns, which is amazing because it's kind of scary. It's scary staying in a stun. Definitely is. Down here, we have our poison resistance and life node in the deadly ambush tree. And at the very end, we do get some trap nodes, but it's not about the damage the trap does, because our caltrops aren't going to do great damage. They're not, but they're going to apply stuff like slows, and they're going to help us do additional damage to enemies, not only because of these nodes here, that we do 10% additional damage to enemies affected by traps. There's 5, 5, 5. There's also, we take less damage if an enemy is affected by a trap, which is great. And our last glyph is 20% increased chill effect. This is good if you want to use the, which is completely an option, this one here. The chill effect here. That's completely an option. Me, I personally like the crit chance one. So, one reason why I left this here is because I wanted to show the other option for glyphs. So, there is the 10% damage reduction for close enemies. Like I said, we have that in our tree already in a passive. You are gonna take damage from close enemies. If you're playing hardcore, this is a sure option. This is pretty good, but I don't like the top thing. You do more damage to close targets. We don't want enemies close anyway, and I know it will happen. We just don't want it to continually happen and use that as a method or like a, how do I say this? Count for that to happen. Let that happen, right? An enemy closes the gap, we want to get away from them. This one here, exploit, this is the one I would go with personally. It's a little bit more damage at the end of our tree where you feel a little bit safer going for damage at the very end because you have a whole ton of survivability nodes kind of going here. When an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. This cannot happen more than once every 20 seconds per enemy. Per enemy. Get that? So it's not like you proc a vulnerable on an enemy, it goes on cooldown for 20 seconds. No, it goes on cooldown for 20 seconds for that enemy, but there's a whole ton of enemies here. So as we hit them, everyone's getting vulnerable guaranteed on the first hit. This is what I would go with. Now, one thing we've got to be careful about here is we do need to pick up the 25 strength here. So how are we going to do that? I would recommend dropping the intelligence, picking up the strength here. We need 5 nodes, right? So we got 1, 2, 3, and we could pull the points out of here and go like that. And that's your 5 nodes right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would give you 29 with the 2 7s, so you're good to go there. You do have 1 additional point. I would personally put it in the poison resist right there, and that's how I would leave that build. And like I said, if at any point you find, hey, I got enough resist for poison, I have a lot, you could do that. You could pull it out, throw an extra point in intelligence here. Maybe you want to buff this a little bit more, so you find another strength node because this is based off strength. Every 5 strength, we do more damage to vulnerable targets. Certainly an option, but while you're leveling, you have gear changing, things moving around a lot. You can't really guarantee that you're going to always have your resist up. You might get a really, really nice chest piece, but your chest piece you're wearing has 20% poison resist, but the new chest has just so much better. It's got your crit chance, it's got life on it, it's got a cooldown reduction. You really want to equip this thing, but you're going to lose 20% poison resist. That's why I don't like to really play around with Paragon Tree resist. I like to leave them how they are so I can kind of work with the gear and the gems a little bit more rather than constantly be respecting the Paragon Tree. Just the way I like to go about it, but when you're in your final set towards the end of the game, you definitely can move those points around. There's nothing saying you can't do that. And keep in mind, crit is our big thing for this build. So if at any point, if you're playing softcore, at any point you say, I really, really want more damage, there are crit nodes close by. You could make use of crit damage nodes like that. There's also that legendary node here, which is not bad. It's when enemies are affected by the trap, we do more damage, more crit damage to them. It's not bad. And we do get increased crit strike chance against enemies affected by our trap if we go with this. So you are going to be critting a lot when they're in the trap anyway, and that increases crit damage when they're affected by the trap. So it's an option. So softcore players, there are definitely more damage nodes out there for you. If you want to like remove the resist and life nodes here, remove all these points right here, and just jet down here for the crit damage, you could certainly do that. It would work. It's very easy to do, and the build still works quite easily for softcore if you wish to go for that route. You're scared of hardcore a little bit. I get it. I've been there. I haven't. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked the video, let me know. If you have a similar build, throw it at me. I'd love to look at other people's builds. If you ever have questions, you want me to like review your build and say, hey, what do you think? We can kind of go back and forth, maybe on stream. You're always welcome to join the stream. I'll link that stream in the description. And we do that all the time. We talk builds back and forth. Good stuff. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later!